Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am delighted to introduce today's guest, Dr. Gian Varbaro. Dr. Varbaro is the Chief Medical Officer and Vice President of Ambulatory Services at Bergen Newbridge Medical Center, where he has played a key role in transforming the hospital into a top-performing healthcare institution. With over 2 decades of leadership in hospital medicine and healthcare management, Dr. Varbaro has a proven track record of improving patient care, operational efficiency, and medical education. He has held roles at institutions like Yale New Haven Medical Hospital, St. Vincent's Medical Center, and Jackson North Medical Center, where he led a successful clinical turnaround. Dr. Varbaro graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Science from Brown University and received his MD from New York University. He completed his residency in internal medicine at UMDNJ Robert Wood Johnson in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Additionally, he earned his MBA from Yale School of Management, a board-certified internal medicine physician. Dr. Varbaro is also a dedicated educator at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, where he is an associate professor of medicine. Additionally, he is a valued public health leader, serving as the chief medical advisor to Bergen County, New Jersey, since August of 2021. Recognized with numerous awards, including a Congressional Recognition Award for his COVID-19 response, Dr. Varbaro is committed to advancing healthcare equity and innovation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gian Varbaro. And I'm going to call you John from here on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you, John. So as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. So take us back to those early years, John, and tell us a little bit about them and how they may or may not have informed where you are today.
Absolutely. So I grew up in the suburbs of New York. My parents both came from kind of meager beginnings, for lack of a better term. My father was born in southern Italy and moved to Rome when he was 9 years old, and came to the United States when he was 28 years old. He came actually to look after the rest of his family because they were coming over. But, my grandfather, my father's father, had to drop out of school in the 2nd grade to go work on the farm. And so my grandparents had tried very hard to make sure their children were educated and had culture. And my father even worked as a child so he could go to school, like on the side. He had actually wanted to become an academic, but fell out of academia because he had a bad temper and lost his temper in an inappropriate time. So he was working as a restaurant manager in Rome when he came to the U.S., started going back to school to learn English, and eventually started working as an electrician and became a very successful electrician. He eventually did get a master's degree in political science. He was already married, and I was already born when that happened, and he got offered teaching positions, but he loved electrical work and he loved working construction so much that he didn't do that. And he stayed actually as an electrical contractor. And when I was young, I worked for him. So I'm one of the few doctors you can meet who can say that they formerly worked in construction.
Wow, that's great. I love it.
My mom is the youngest of 6 kids. She was born in Brooklyn, New York. Her father was from Italy as well. He was from Sicily. He actually came to the U.S. to try to perform in vaudeville. He did not make it. He was working as a longshoreman, so working on the docks. My grandmother had been born here in the States, but her parents were from Italy. She had been orphaned as a child. And so my mom was the youngest of 6 kids. So they kind of grew up again with with low means as well. And my parents met and really had this thing that they wanted my sister and I to really have more things than they did. And they really dedicated themselves to doing that. My father worked 7 days a week. Like he literally took off maybe 20 to 25 days a year, including vacations and holidays and that stuff. Like he worked nonstop just so that we could have opportunities, and literally built the house we lived in. We moved a couple of times when I was young, but eventually we settled in a very nice town in Westchester County, which, if you know Westchester County, New York, is a very nice area. And we were living in an area that was pricier than our financial means should have allowed us to live in. But my parents got the land cheap, and my father built the house himself with my mother and with his friends. And so I actually grew up watching my father literally build our house, and my mom, I should say too, because my mom was equally important. My father would have been the first person to tell you my mom was equally important, if not more important. And so watch them build it with their own hands in front of me as a kid. So, that kind of placed on me this feeling of, you had to strive yourself forward. Like people made so many sacrifices for me, but in addition to also make the world kind of a better place, because that was kind of what my parents always preached. I remember when I was a little kid, there was a family in the town. This was before we moved to the fancier town, who they had 7 kids, and like they weren't able to go on like the field trip for school. And, being like 7 years old, I remember I made some comment about it. My mother lectured me, of like, you don't know what they go through. You don't know what it's like. You should never say that kind of stuff. And so that stuff always stuck with me. And I always had that kind of in my head of like this feeling of like, there should be more justice or more fairness for people. And I should do what I could to do that. I was always really good at school. I was lucky, I things came naturally to me. And so again, I kind of felt this like responsibility that I had to do something more. Eventually I ended up going to college at Brown University, and I went there not intending to go into medicine at all. Yeah. So again, my father always used to tell me, well, you should be a doctor. And so as a teenager, that meant the one thing I didn't want to be was a doctor.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So I actually went to college initially intending to go into academics. I wanted to be a professor of some kind or a teacher, but started realizing that I was not totally built for the pure academics world. I'm way too talkative and way too much of a people person to be somebody who was always worried about publishing and that kind of stuff. Went through a couple of different iterations, eventually landed in medicine. After a couple of things happened, I had a friend who passed away, not from a medical issue, but again, it was one of those, like he passed away, and it felt like, again, there was no justice in the world. And I just came to this thing of, I wanted to do something where I really impacted people's lives. And I remember sitting down and thinking like, well, what are the professions you can do where you impact people's lives? One's a priest, but I'm not really religious. One's a teacher, which I liked doing. And the third is a doctor, really. And so I came to this thing of like, maybe I could be a doctor who teaches. And so that kind of set me off on my career path.
So tell us a little more about that, because it sounds like you pursued a number of things undergrad. So were you prepared to go to medical school, or did you have to do something extra to get yourself ready for that? Or
so I made the decision junior year, so I had enough time.
I see.
So I started off as a physics major, and then I became a math major.
Oh, okay.
I really have like the dorkiest background and stuff. I'm like the hard science math person. But I had taken some biology classes. So in the end, I ended up as a molecular and cellular biology major. And so I was able to I had done, in the course of those other things, there was enough overlap. I had done the pre-med classes. I just had to take the MCATs, which junior year is usually when you take those. So I made the decision with enough time that I took them that year. And so I was able to go straight into medical school. So I was okay.
But you made it clear to your dad, I'm sure, that you were doing this on your own volition, not because he wanted you to, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, he was right. Damn it,
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a difference when you come to that conclusion yourself versus something that, a well-intentioned adult, right, has wished something for you. They have a different image of it. And I'm sure you could talk about this quite a bit. The practice of medicine, being a physician, being a doctor in today's world versus when you entered it, it's changed a whole lot. And even just the idea of becoming a doctor in your father's eyes is a very different world and worldview of medicine and doctors than what we experience today.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Although, it's funny. My whole career, everybody's been talking about how much everything's changing. I
Yeah.
started medical school in the 1990s, and
Mm-hmm.
at that point, it was everything's changing. Capitation, if you remember, capitation was a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was around the time of the Clintons. They tried to do their healthcare reform.
Right.
That's
Right.
everything. And then as that petered out, it became, well, now it's the move away from capitation. That's going to change everything. And then it was, the ACA, Obamacare. That's going to change. Everything's changing. And then it was COVID. And
Right.
now it's new stuff. So, the one constant has been change and
Yeah.
revolution. And so it's not as changed as you think it is.
Yeah.
I hear people always complain about that, but if you
Yeah.
really think about it, the way I describe it is it's just putting a different veneer, a different face, but on the same basic things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good to hear that perspective
Yeah.
because you hear a variety of things out there about what does it mean to enter the profession and to take that on. And so it sounds like your view is that the intention in which you went into it with, you've continued with in many ways. So take us forward from there. You went to medical school.
Yeah. So I get to medical school and, I'm the young idealistic, and I went to Brown University. And for those people who are listening who don't know it, Brown's this very idealistic place.
Yes. Yes.
I had long hair in college and like weird facial hair configurations and, so I get to medical school and I remember just being struck with how different it was from what I thought it was going to be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, because again, I went into this whole thing, it's like, we're all here to take care of people and to change the world and to do all this stuff. And no, that's not what most people are there for. And that's not most of the healthcare establishment is set up for. It's really
Yeah.
set up in many ways to kind of continue its status quo.
Mm.
I think that that's kind of what eventually starts me on the journey I ended up taking, which was just being really frustrated with it and not liking it and being young and being self-absorbed as young people tend to be. I thought that the issue with everything was what was right in front of me. So it was the medical education system has to be reformed, has to change. And so that really kind of reinforced I want to be a doctor who teaches. I want to go into healthcare education. I want to change the system. I want to change how it all works. And so that led me to going to do my medicine residency at Robert Wood Johnson. Oh, the other thing I should say, I started off as wanting to do pediatrics, and I realized that the really nice thing about pediatrics is that kids are very resilient. They tend to get better very quickly. But when they didn't, I couldn't take it. It bothered me too much. I was like, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown doing this. So I switched to adults and so went into internal medicine. So I ended up doing my residency at Robert Wood Johnson in New Jersey, which was, again, much more of a humanistic type of program. Particularly the person who was the residency program director at that time, he had really been the person who had built up the medicine residency program and had this very much like patient first, this whole ethos around how the program was set up and how we were taught. That really appealed to me when I went there for interviewing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and I'd been so frustrated with everything. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And so it ended up being fortunate that I matched there. And ended up going there for residency.
And yeah, because you don't always get to go where you don't always get matched where you want to go. So that was very fortunate.
Yeah.
So did it give you a lot of what you hoped it would?
Yeah, there were a few things. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I remember my first month in residency was actually terrible. I had a really difficult senior resident I was working with. She was having some issues
Mm.
at the time, and I remember just being so frustrated because
Mm.
just feeling like I thought that this place was going to be different. It's not.
Mm. Feel.
Maybe
Mm.
I've made a mistake. I remember having a lot of doubt, and so being like, well, let's see what the second month of residency is like. But I'm like, now I've got all this debt because again, I don't come from money, so
Yeah.
I have all this debt from medical school, and how am I going to do this if this isn't the right fit? What am I going to
Yeah.
do? And this, my second month, so in residency, you rotate to different things. So
Right.
my first month, I was an intern on a regular medical ward at one of the hospitals that our residency went to. My second month, I was an intern in the intensive care unit. It was probably our hardest rotation at our busiest hospital.
Yeah.
And I had the best month there.
Huh.
I had really the most fantastic senior resident so I went from the terrible one to I have not seen her, talk to her in probably 20 years, and if I could see her I would tell her she'd saved my career. I
Really?
like she like it just really reignited like the spark in me, like because this was somebody who like everything was always about doing the right thing and just like preternaturally nice person. Like I remember later on in residency talking with somebody who became a friend of mine, but he had switched into our residency midway through, which people do sometimes. And he
Oh.
was and she was now the chief resident. But he was saying, he's like, I won't say her name, but he said, I met, blah, blah, blah. And I thought she was full of it because I was like, there's no way somebody could be this nice. It's like,
Oh.
she's really that nice, isn't she? I was like, yeah, she is.
Wow.
And it changed the course of my career.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And yet you were surrounded by all these other people in
Mhm.
the whole mix. And it's
Yeah.
amazing how one person can really have that much
Yeah.
influence.
It really is. It tells, like I think on it so many times I fell into luck. I think there's a whole thing in career development of I think people I think people think that they have more to do with stuff sometimes than they actually do. It's amazing how much good and bad luck shapes your career.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the skill is learning to realize when you've had good luck and trying to maximize it and realizing when you've had bad luck and trying to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I've had a few times where I got really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think I maximized what I got out of those times.
Well, I have a philosophy about luck in
Hmm.
terms of the idea that the fact that you maximize it is what creates the luck. You have to
Hmm.
step into it, right?
Right.
And so you did, and you even hung in there with in the previous month
Yeah.
with the bad situation.
Yeah.
Something, you didn't just in just a matter of a few weeks after all those years of medical school just
Hmm.
walk away, right?
Yeah.
So take us forward from there.
Yeah. So the one other thing as I went into residency, because I had kind of decided late what I wanted to do, both become a doctor and then what specialty I
Yeah.
was in medical school, I wanted initially to subspecialize. So if people don't know, in healthcare, you do a residency and then you can subspecialize. So internal medicine, some of the subspecialties are things like cardiology,
Right.
nephrology, endocrinology, oncology. You think of these as separate doctors, but they've all done an internal medicine residency, and then they do what's called a fellowship
Mm.
afterwards. They do a second set of training for their subspecialty. I kept flip-flopping
Oh yeah.
on do I want to do cardiology, or I really loved pulmonary and critical care when I did
Mm.
ICU months.
Uh-huh.
So I kept flip-flopping on which one I wanted to do, and I couldn't make a decision,
Mm.
which is strange because I usually tend to be pretty decisive, but I couldn't figure out which one I wanted to do. At the same time, I had gone straight from high school to college to medical school to residency, never taking off. As I mentioned before, I had taken on a lot of debt.
Mhm.
And so I said, you know what? There's this new thing. It's called hospitalist. And I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll get a job doing this for like 2 years. I'll figure out what I want to do and I'll go back.
Mm.
So a hospitalist, again, for your listeners who don't know.
Yeah.
So this actually is a system that was in place in most European countries and other westernized countries, Japan and Australia, since the post-World War II era, but didn't come into the United States until 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Where the idea is that, in the old days, your home doctor would come and be the person who saw you in the hospital, and they would go between both things. But as healthcare evolved, as we learned more, as we got more knowledge, and in doing that, we also learned that there's times you probably shouldn't be in the hospital. Sometimes patients think like they're getting kicked out of the hospital, but the reality is that sometimes staying in the hospital in certain cases can be more dangerous than going home. People do
Yeah.
better at home because they eat normally, they move around more, they do all these other things, right?
Yeah.
So as we did that, though, the patients in the hospital got sicker. It got harder and harder for people to do both things. And so
Right.
the specialty kind of evolved called hospital medicine or hospitalist, where you eventually had physicians who were in the hospital 24/7, 365, who were your patients and your doctor in the hospital, and your primary care doctor stayed out of the hospital. And the way that I explained it to people always was, I'm your doctor's partner in the hospital.
Mhm.
You know, because people understand that your doctor's partner might be the person who sees
Right.
you.
Right.
And it's just that we have a practice and we take in a lot of other private practice and we become them in the hospital. That was the
Mhm.
idea, the concept. So I was like, I'll find one of those jobs for 2 years. And again, this is where luck comes in. My residency program director was also the chair of medicine at one of the hospitals that we went to in our residency. And he had been trying for a couple of years to get permission from the administration to start a hospitalist program.
Aha.
And it just so happened he got the permission right when I was looking for a job. In retrospect, I don't think he could get anybody else because nobody else was stupid enough to take the job. But he knew I was looking for a hospitalist job, and he came to me and he said, "Do you want to do this? Do you want to come and found the program?" I said, "Sure." Not realizing what I was getting myself into.
Right.
The program's not easy.
Right.
So I said yes, and it ended up taking my career again in this totally different pathway.
Yeah.
And hospitalist was such a new thing at that time. Like nobody really understood it. They didn't know how to pay us. They didn't know how to structure it. People were afraid of it because people are always afraid of change.
Right.
So, doctors tend to be paranoid. And they tend to be self-absorbed. People don't know that.
No one knows that.
Right? So they think everything's about them. So like a lot of doctors thought this was somehow some trick that the hospital was doing to steal their patients or do something like that instead of something that can help them. I'll never forget. I got 2 death threats running that program. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I got 2 death threats from physicians. It was crazy. And I remember when I was starting it up, they told me, go write a business plan. I was like, I don't know how to write a business plan. I've never done that before. I remember because this was 2003. I went to the public library and I took out a book on writing a business plan. And I just made something up, to do it. But, so I kind of found myself in this role, but it was like the greatest education ever. I spent a little over 2 years in that job and I got 10 years worth of experience in it because I was just stuff out and not only that, but that hospital's administration at that time was not very strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always arguing with them and they would do things that I found very frustrating. And then also in the middle of that, they split off from the Robert Wood system. And so the residency program I had done got split in half.
Oh.
My program director who had built up that program because of loyalty, because he had started at the smaller hospital, stayed with them.
Oh.
And so the residency program got cleaved in half. And everybody kind of there was like a civil war in the program. Everybody had to choose sides. So I ended up staying with my program director who had hired me and I stayed with him. And we had to, so he lost this program he had built up over these years and we had to found a new program at that hospital. So I helped found that. So again, it was, here I am. I started in that job. I was 28. By the time I left, I was 30. And I helped found a residency and helped found a hospitalist program and like all of these things. And again, just got a lot of like on the job experience and like fumbling and figuring stuff out and figuring out how to do it and realized that I had a talent for it actually and that I liked doing it. And again, it kind of fell into my like reformer thing that I wanted to do of like, it felt like we were really doing cutting edge stuff. Like, we have to like, it stinks that we have to create this new program. But let's try to take advantage of it. What can we do with it? Like, what can we do that nobody's thought to do before? And it was really exciting and really interesting. And I really loved doing that. But at the same time, the administration kept undermining us. And it was so frustrating that I was getting burnt out. I could stop getting burnt out. I gained a lot of weight. I was not feeling well. Like everything was kind of falling apart. And so I said, you know what? I have to go because this is not tenable.
Yeah.
And not only that, at a certain point, sometimes you become the problem yourself, right? Because I was always there to bail bail out the bad decisions. And so there was never consequences for the bad decisions. And I always felt ethically like I couldn't just let the bad thing happen, you know? So, and around that time I got recruited up to Yale. And so it was a good opportunity to go there. I made a mistake, again, being young, because what had happened there was they had nominally started a hospitalist program about a year and a half, 2 years before, but it really wasn't built. It was more of what one of the predecessors to hospitals was a thing called house doctor programs, where you would respond to emergencies and that kind of stuff in house. And so they had changed it. It was a hospitals program, it wasn't a house doctor program, but still had a lot of that imprimatur on it. I said that word wrong, but and the person who was running it really, he was a smart, very, very smart guy, but it wasn't really his field. It was kind of dropped on him to try to fix it too. So he had recruited me under this thing of like, you're going to help me fix this up. I should have insisted that they gave me a title. I didn't. So I went in there as just a regular hospitalist, but ended up being the person who was designing and doing everything again. So this was I made a mistake on that, being young and not thinking that was important, but
Well, I mean, this is how we learn things. I'm thinking a mistake. You were 30, 31. You'd been out of school, what? Barely a few years, right? You were kind of learning on the job, but yet you also had the opportunity to step into this and take a programmatic role, take some initiative in a situation, whereas probably in other hospitals or other institutions, there would have been no wiggle room to even do that.
Yeah, they wouldn't have listened to me if I had gone there a few years later. So it was one of those, like, I never had the formal title, but I was kind of behind the scenes, the person who was doing a lot of stuff, which put me in the middle of arguments a bit. But yeah, I went there and I spent over 6.5 years there and helped build up a lot of different things, did a lot of initiatives, too many to count, while I was there. And again, never had the title, but later on, I remember again being frustrated, but later on feeling like once I did get titled up correctly, I had done so many different things that it ended up being fine. And I had done them because it had the Yale name on it. It ended up being very valuable. So even stuff that sometimes feels like you're not being appreciated or treated the way you think you should be, sometimes it ended up all being stuff that I learned from and ended up being very helpful.
And the things that were frustrating you at the time were tied to things that probably involved either quality of services, patient care, programming, things like that. It wasn't about, well, I don't have the right title and my ego is getting damaged here. I mean, you were getting frustrated. I mean, you've talked about several points where you were just frustrated, but you were frustrated about all the things you cared about working on. Like you kept going and kept going. So in a way, the frustration was fueling all the things you cared about.
Oh, absolutely. It was the like, we could be doing this better. Why aren't we doing this better? We should be doing it better. It was that kind of stuff. When I talk to other healthcare people, I'm always like, I was the jerk doctor who was always telling everybody that they didn't know what they were doing. And, it became one of those, okay, well, then you do it, and I was like, sure, fine, I'll show you. But it was a good way to get me to do a lot of stuff. It became a joke both there and at the next place I was at. The residents and my students, I've heard it from them at both places. They used to joke like, tomorrow I expect to see Dr. Varbaro pushing a broom down the hallway because he has every other job in this hospital. So it was one of those things. I like, oh, we can't figure it out. Somebody do it. See if Varbaro will do it. Okay. But again, I got tons of experience. Like, it's funny. Like I sometimes talk with young doctors who want to do what I did. And they ask me like, how did you do it? Because I moved up when I decided to start moving up the ladder, I moved up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, unfortunately, the pathway I took doesn't really exist anymore because when I was doing it, nobody wanted to do this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was one of those, like, because I was one of the few people who was willing to do it, I got a ton of experience early. I didn't get paid as well as they get paid today or treated as well, but I get paid in experience, which ended up being more valuable than any of that.
Did you recognize that at the time, or do you think were you you were younger.
Yes.
Were you more caught up in the frustration of it all? But something kept you going. I mean,
Yeah, I was caught up in the frustration of it. Again, it was this underlying sense I had of like justice and probably brazen confidence of like I know I'm right, and I have to.
uh,
And the other thing is, 2 years into working at Yale, I met my now wife.
uh-huh.
And she didn't work at Yale. She's not a physician. She's not in healthcare, but I ended up meeting her. She grew up in that area. And
Ah,
so that actually kept me there longer. I probably would have left sooner, but I started dating her and then we got married and then we did
uh-huh.
whatever. And I actually did leave very briefly to go to another hospital.
Oh,
And it turned out that I had been lied to about what the job was. I showed up on the first day and they changed the job on me. And without going into all the details, because it's kind of
right.
a really nasty story, I found issues with finances while I was there, and I raised the issues and whatever. And I ended up leaving there in 3 weeks, kind of
Wow.
as a mutual thing of like, why don't I just go away? Pointing out to the administration, like, here's what's going on. You guys have to deal with this, but this is not okay. Like, they lied to me to bring me in, and I feel like I'm getting set up and
Mm.
result of this stuff. And fortunately, Yale set it up so that I had left on a sabbatical so I could come back in. They wanted me to stay.
Oh,
So
wow.
I formally never left Yale, even though I had kind of sort of left, but I
Yeah,
had gone on a
yeah,
sabbatical for 3 weeks and I came back.
yeah.
Um, but again, another
It's a
lesson learned, right?
short sabbatical.
Yeah. But another lesson learned, right? Because,
Yeah.
it's funny. When I was interviewing at that job, I kept feeling like something was off.
Yeah.
I remember talking with my wife and being like, there's something I don't know, but I was so frustrated, like
Mm.
with Yale,
Yeah.
that I just took the job just to get out. And big mistake. And I've seen other people make it since then. And I always tell people, like, don't leave because you're angry. Like,
Right.
don't just take the first thing. Make sure that it's the right thing for
Right.
you,
Right.
because I made that mistake and I got lucky again that I was able
Yeah.
to exit without it being messy, and I was able to go back to a place I knew and do that. And
Right.
so I went back, and at the same time, after all of these years of doing this stuff, I realized, like, I'm sitting here arguing with people who don't understand what I'm talking about because I'm talking doctor at them,
Mm.
and they're not going to go to medical school and learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to learn to speak their language, which is what led to me going to get my MBA.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, that's where that came from. So I went back and I was looking at night programs or that kind of stuff because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't need the fanciest thing. I'll do whatever and do it
Right.
cheaper and that kind of stuff. Again, I didn't come from money in the first place. I had debts from school, so I was like, let me just do whatever. And I remember I was talking to all these different places, and my wife was the one who said to me, like, you work at Yale, right? That that they have to take you at their program if you apply. Like, you should do the Yale program. I was like, but it's expensive and you know, it's whatever. And she was like, this is an investment in you. And we need to, like, you have broader aspirations to do bigger stuff. Like, if you were just like, I'm just going to do it to do some small things, I would agree with you, just do the smaller one. But you have bigger aspirations. You should go do the biggest program you can get into, and
Yeah.
we'll figure out the finances. And as you can tell, I married very well. My wife is very, very smart, and she's my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader. It ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made was doing that program. That program is phenomenal.
Yeah. I've heard really great things about it.
Yeah.
So when did you do the MBA? When was that?
So I did. They had an executive program. At that point, it was only for
Ah.
healthcare. Now they have other tracks as well.
Uh-huh.
But I did it I started in August of 2011 and graduated in May of 2013.
Ah,
And it
okay.
was, we did the full MBA program. Like, sometimes executive programs are like abbreviated programs. We did the full
Right.
same coursework as the regular students and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge fan of that program. I think it was amazing. Both the professors and the people I met with and my classmates. I still, like, my classmates and I have a text chain. Like, we still chat with each other all the time. Like, it
That's
was
great.
one of those things where it became like a group that we're always in touch with each other.
How
They're
wonderful.
just amazing people. And what was nice is they all were in healthcare, but different parts. So,
Mm.
some people worked in pharma, some people worked in insurance, some people worked in life sciences, some people were physicians or nurses or social workers. So it was a really nice mix of people. It was a
Nice.
really great experience, and it opened my eyes up to a bunch of stuff I hadn't realized.
So say more about that.
So, again, I was always frustrated with decisions that people were making that I didn't understand. And suddenly I could understand why they were making some of them.
Ah,
Like it gave me a different perspective to look at stuff from and be like, oh, now I see that part. I get why my thing that I want to do wasn't completely the right way to do it.
uh-huh.
Now I can see a way that fits both what I think and what would work for that. And it
Mm.
gave me a different perspective. And it
Mhm.
ended up being, it really changed how I looked at a lot of stuff in healthcare. And it really changed my focus from the whole, I want to reform the teaching system to I want to reform the whole system because
Mhm.
the whole system has places it needs to be fixed. And it really changed my approach to everything.
Wow.
It was one of the best decisions I ever made was to go do that program.
Wow. That's amazing. So once you finished that program,
Mhm.
did you move on from Yale at that point?
So halfway through the program, I at the same time they were founding the Quinnipiac Medical School.
Ah.
And Quinnipiac, for people who don't know, is in North Haven, Connecticut.
Hmm.
Yale's in New Haven, so literally just north of it. So it's right there. And some friends of mine who had been Yale expats were involved in that. And so I kind of backdoor got recruited through them. It was actually a very funny story because the dean who was putting together the group, I was talking with him and I had this really great phone call with him because friends had put us in touch. And like a 40-minute phone call. At the end of it, he kind of does the whole like, I totally get who you are. I'd love to have you be part of this. Here's the problem. The way we're structured is the university is going to be hiring people only who work in the first and second years. And you're really in medical school, the third and fourth years are when you're in the clinical wards. He's like, you're an on the ground person. Like you are a clinician, you teach clinical stuff. Like you are the in the weeds person.
Hmm.
Like those people are going to be hired by our hospital partners and we
Mm.
haven't announced them yet. So, I think you're great, but I don't think we could hire you through the university. But I'd love to take you out to lunch sometime. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the like, thanks but no thanks, thing. And I'll call you whenever. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I'll take lunch with the guy. I said, okay, sure. I have time next week or whatever. He said, no, 6 weeks. I was like, okay, 6 weeks from now. So we
Sounds
set up,
arbitrary, doesn't it?
yeah. So we set up a day we were going to have this lunch. It was on I never forget. It was on a Tuesday. 6 weeks pass. On the Monday, the day before the lunch, they announce who their first big clinical partner is. It was a hospital in Bridgeport, Connecticut called St. Vincent's. They announced it literally the day before our lunch. So then I realized what he was up to. So I go out to lunch with him. We have lunch. And at the end, he goes, I think you're great. I want you to be employed at St. Vincent's. Here's the name of the chair of medicine. Call him and tell him I sent you. And that's what happened. So it was, so really that's how it happened. It happened really through, again, connections and making a connection with this guy and ended up going there to St. Vincent's. Again, because I'd been undertitled at Yale, my formal title was medical director of hospital medicine, but I was kind of acting as one of two vice chairs of medicine. There was me and one other person who was already there. And the two of us were basically vice chairs, but we were undertitled. And, ended up getting involved in all of this different stuff. And again, another great thing for me because my boss, the guy who hired me, he was good at all the stuff I wasn't good at. And so like I was really not good at the systems based, internal house politics part of leadership. And he was phenomenal at that. And I learned so much working with him
Oh, wow.
that it became a strength. Then now I consider it a strength of mine. It was from working with him.
Wow.
At the same time, they also had a CFO there who was known for kind of being tough, but he was very, very smart and really understood stuff and was atypical from a lot of hospital CFOs in that he really understood like that you have to invest in things, because a lot of times hospitals, if they're not from the clinical side and they just think, pure dollars and cents, they don't
Right,
understand
right.
what affects other stuff. And he was really nuanced in how he understood stuff, but people had kind of a bad reputation for him because he didn't suffer fools well.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I had to present something to him, they all scared me to death, of him. And I went in to present and I was, halfway through the MBA at this point, I finished it up while I was working there. I remember starting to present to him and I could see his eyes light up. And I think he realized, oh, this is a doctor who actually knows what he's talking about. And so he ended up taking me under wing and teaching me as well. So
Wow.
I ended up with two mentors there. kind of out of nowhere.
Wow.
And again, just super, super helpful. And so it was that job really, in terms of like thinking through like career planning, it was very intentional. Like I'm moving up the ladder, but I'm
Right.
also getting an opportunity to do stuff I haven't normally gotten to do.
Right.
And I got lucky again in that I found two people who were really fantastic mentors. And by the time I kind of learned what I had to learn from them, I was ready to move on to the next place. So it was
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah. It sounds like you really got almost like a balancing
Hmm.
of all the other important, not that it was totally comprehensive, but that you got a real balancing out of all those things that had been frustrating you so much. You got a deepening of an understanding of a lot of those things and able
Yeah.
to really have those conversations and work with people differently and still also be that doctor who teaches at the
Yeah.
same time, right?
Yeah.
So where did you go from oh, I know, I have one other question
Yeah.
now.
Of course.
So you never went back and did a specialty, did you?
I never did. I fell in love with hospital medicine
There you
and
go.
my career.
Well, that's a specialty in and of
It
itself.
is. It is. So yeah. So by the time I finished my 2 years at St. Peter's, I was like, no, this is what I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Really like
So,
this. This is what I'm good at. I like doing this.
well, and then you got the MBA, so it's not
Yeah.
like you
Took me in a different direction. Yeah.
I wouldn't say you were slacking.
No.
So so from St. Vincent's, where did you go from there?
So at that point, I said, well, let me go out and start applying for other positions, thinking, maybe I'll get a chair of medicine job.
Mhm.
And there's actually more interest in me as a chief medical officer. Again, between
Ah.
and all of the stuff I had done all of these kind of like in retrospect, I had done all the parts of being a chief medical officer
Mm.
without ever having the title or the name or anything like that. So I had done everything. I had been involved that I didn't mention, but I was very involved in quality improvement the whole time and building new programs and business development and, mentoring people and like all of the things that a good chief medical officer should be able to do was what I was doing in all of these different jobs. I was picking up the
Yeah.
skills, realizing it.
Yeah.
And so I started, the places who wanted to interview me for chief medical officer jobs.
Mm.
And eventually I got offered a job down in Miami. And so that was another, my wife and I had a conversation at that point because, our kids were, well, so at that point, our son was 2 and my
Mhm.
wife was pregnant with twins,
Oh,
which,
wow.
and so again, I married well. My wife moved across the country 5 months pregnant with twins. There's not many people who would do that. Yeah. Like I said, I'm very lucky, but we made a decision like, okay, if we're going to do this now, if we're going to jump around a little bit for a couple of years here, like now's the time to do it when the kids are young. And then
Yeah.
we settle, where we settle. But this is the opportunity. We're not pulling them out of stuff. They won't remember any of this. And so we moved down to Miami,
Right.
offered to be the chief medical officer at Jackson North Medical Center. And Jackson
Wow.
Health System in Miami is the county health system. It had been in trouble for a while. And about 2 years prior to when I went there, everything had kind of blown up and the county had kind of gotten rid of the old leadership and they started a whole new leadership team there. And so they'd been 2 years into the turnaround. And the chief medical officer of the system was starting to hire individual chief medical officers for the individual hospitals.
I
So
see.
the first one who got hired for that, and they put me at the hospital that needed the most work at that point, which was Jackson North, which was in community hospital in North Miami Beach.
Mhm.
And so I actually started doing some more primary care work again when I was there because I was of the opinion a lot of chief medical officers don't see patients, and I was of the opinion that you should. Um,
Absolutely.
because I think it allowed me to see how things were working. And so I was like, I need to see both ends of it. I can't just see the inpatient side. We have these outpatient areas. So I need to start looking at that too. And so I started picking up primary care again, doing inpatient shifts, doing kind of everything and kind of learning the ropes there. And again, a big learning experience. And it was nice because I had a safety net because I had a system chief medical officer I could go to. And they were 2 years into the turnaround already. So it was a real learning experience there. But, in the course of the 2.5 years, there are a couple of things happened. One,
Mm.
I was about to have my fourth CEO in the 2.5 years because it was a place where they brought in a lot of young people who were up and coming. Like
Yeah.
that was the thing. There was a constant turnover because it was, they did something which I think is smart. If you don't have a lot of money, because you're a safety net place, like they would take chances on people who were younger in their careers. Now that's a high risk, high reward thing. So we would get a
Yeah.
lot. Some people would flame out quickly. Some people were very good, but then they'd move up into another position, right? So it was constantly turning over.
Wow.
So that was side one. But the bigger issue was my wife actually got very sick while we were there,
Oh,
and it got kind of scary. And we, you know, it was very hard because all of my wife's family's in Connecticut, my family's in New York.
yeah.
Didn't really have anybody there. I had 3 young kids, so we said, let's
Yeah.
try to move back to the Northeast. I remember my wife and I went out to dinner one night, and we had that conversation like, okay, this next year we're going to try to make the move again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating. The next day, I got the recruiter email that they sent it to everybody. It wasn't like it was just for me. They sent it to like everybody.
Yeah.
That there was this opportunity up in New Jersey at a hospital that was now going to be called Bergen Newbridge Medical Center. It had had different names over the years, and Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School was involved. And so Robert Wood Johnson used to be part of something called UMDNJ, which had split apart and now had become Rutgers. So New Jersey Medical School was the other half of it because it was kind of 2 schools in one.
Mhm.
And so there was part of me that was like, oh, this is kind of like a full circle moment, even though it's not Robert Wood. It's kind of a going home thing.
Yeah.
Opportunity. It's this hospital. It's a similar thing to the Jackson thing, where it was this county hospital that had been failing for a long time, had a really bad reputation, really needed a big turnaround. So it's like, oh, this is my opportunity to not just be the younger guy, but to be the top of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to kind of prove my points. And so
Yeah.
I remember going on the interview here and understanding what the problem was. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I talked with like a lot of us who were here at the beginning here, and a lot of them were like, I didn't realize what it was. I was like, I understood because I had seen stuff before, but I had a vision for it. I kind of had I was like, I know what I want to do with this. And I remember I talked with our CEO about it, and and after a career of everybody telling me no or whatever, she was like, let's try it because kind of a mess and like we can't go down, and just being like, yeah, let's try it, see if it works. And so it's like, okay, this is the spot. So this is kind of my full circle moment of like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna see it. Like now it's put up or shut up time. I'm gonna see if I was really right or if I was just convincing myself that I was, and let's give it a shot and a go. And at the worst case scenario, we're returning home and we'll
Yeah.
be close to everybody. Unfortunately, my
Right.
wife's medical status turned around in about a year and a half into working here,
Well, that's
just in
good.
time for the pandemic to happen. But it ended up being the right place to go.
Yeah. And so this is where you are now.
Yeah, 7+ years here now.
Wow, that's a long
Oh,
time. Do you have a
yes, sure
do you have the 7? No, you probably don't want to say this publicly. I was gonna say, do you have a 7-year itch? No, but you came in to really help turn some things around, and I know you've done a lot of different things since you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic hit, when we came in here too, and I knew that this was going to be the case. Like, I had learned I had done basically my whole career had turned out to be change management. Like I kind of told you the whole story, and I still don't know how it kind of happened that became my specialty. I guess I was good at it and I liked doing it. But it really, like, somehow I became the start a new program or turn around the program person, right? And so I knew, I was like, people are going to bucket this, even though the people who work here know that it needs to change, people also don't like their stuff getting changed.
Yeah, right.
So, because they feel threatened by it, understandably so. And especially here, where the staff here had really been abused by the previous leadership. And they had been really trained. The administration always turned over every couple of years. They couldn't trust anybody. They could only trust each other.
Yeah.
At the same time, as part of the turnover, they were, Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School was involved. They were going to bring in these Rutgers doctors. So it wasn't only that. They were telling these doctors, hey, we're going to bring in all these new doctors, kind of sort of to replace you. Not really to replace you, but it kind of feels that way. I would have handled it differently, but I wasn't here when they launched it.
Right.
And so I remember we were actually talking about this a couple of weeks ago. I remember telling my CEO, I could be Jesus Christ and walk on water and turn water into wine, and they're going to hate me. I'm promising you they're going to hate me because I'm the voice of change, and it doesn't matter what I do. but just give me some space. And I promise you, it's going to take 1.5 to 2 years, but they're going to love me at the end of it. And that's what happened.
Oh, that's
And I
great.
was like, yeah, but in a way, the thing that actually turned the tide was the pandemic, because we were kind of all caught in it together. And if we're here in North Jersey, we're right next to Manhattan.
Right.
We got hit like New York City got hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the beginning, when we didn't know anything, people were afraid. Like, people didn't want to see patients. So the first doctor who saw COVID patients here was me.
Oh, wow.
And so, because I was a hospitalist too, right? So they were inpatients. So I went and I did house visits on patients who were like that kind of stuff. I went with a bag of PPE and a bucket of ice to take samples of stuff. And I would change in the PPE in the people's backyards because everybody was freaking out and didn't want the neighbors to see somebody who was coming in and this stuff. And like all kinds of crazy. We did such crazy stuff.
Wow.
But that was really it. And, we really did, this hospital, like I said, had been it had the worst reputation I've ever seen. They had really great people here who were just completely demoralized and broken down. And there were some people, and the previous leadership was doing some things that weren't maybe not the ideal things to do. And so I do think it was, there was a lot of stuff to unpack. There's still not completely finished job. But we've really, like, I think back on what it was when I started here, and the place is so great. And the other thing about us now is we really have, not to pat myself on the back, but we have an amazing medical staff here now. Like, amazing, on par with any of the big name places I worked at. And when I got here, like there were people who were here who are now part of the physician leadership who were here at that time. But again, they hadn't been nurtured. Right. And so I don't get to teach students as much anymore, but I kind of became the person who taught them all how to do this kind of stuff. So when I got here, it was just me. But now there's probably about 15 to 20 doctors who, if God forbid I got hit by a bus tomorrow, like, they wouldn't be in trouble because they are all capable and they're all really strong. I'm very proud of them. I kind of trained them all myself. And so and then, there's the physicians below them. I'm just talking the leadership level, but we have a really amazing group of people here. There's still stuff that needs to be worked on and fixed and stuff, but it really has been an amazing kind of crazy journey.
Wow. I love it. I love hearing that. And I think, no one wants you to get hit by a bus, of course.
No.
But I your point is well taken that, the one of the best signs of a great leader is when you can walk away or go on vacation for a couple of weeks and know that everything's going to be fine, or that there's plenty of good people on board to take things over. So that's got to be very, very satisfying.
It is.
And what a just an interesting story from a career point of view, and how many times you found yourself getting frustrated and then but also then learning all along the way. What's the best way for someone to learn more about? I know you're doing a lot of different things, and we didn't even get into the half of it, but if people want to find out more about the kinds of things that you're doing, where would be the best place for them to find you?
I'm not as active on Twitter or those other things as much as I used to be, but I am very much on LinkedIn and those types of places. And I push out not just myself, but our hospital's webpage. We're doing all kinds of stuff here, not just my stuff, but like the whole team. So, following us on LinkedIn or following the hospital's page on Facebook and those types of places or Twitter are very useful. You can kind of see the kind of cutting edge stuff we're doing here, because we're doing really cutting edge things here that are very cool and fun stuff to be doing.
That's great. So we'll have all of that in the show notes. And being somebody who's made a lot of, I know you say you were, just lucky, but you also, I think, put a lot of intentions out there as you've gone along. So, what would be a key piece of advice you would give someone else who is thinking about what's next in their career?
So I think you hit on the key word, which is intentional. I was always very intentional of thinking, like, what's the next step for me? What is it that I'm not good at? Where can I get stronger at that? Or what are the things that play into my my strengths and what are the things that are my weaknesses. I think that's really important. I think the other thing is I didn't talk about this much, but I was always watching people who were other leaders and seeing what I could. You can learn from anybody.
Yeah.
You can learn from people who you respect, but you can also learn from people you don't respect. And I had, just watching them and being like, so what I would always do is I would watch decisions they would make, and I would think, why are they making that decision? What decision would I make? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? So, even people who I didn't respect, who I was like, oh, I'm understanding why they're making that decision. It's not the best of reasons, but I'm seeing how it's turning out. And, sometimes they're stumbling into something because they're not realizing it. And sometimes it's blowing up on them. So starting to see like, what are the pitfalls that people fall into? What are the things you kind of stumble into without realizing it? So I spent a lot of time thinking about those things. So in that way, it's intentionality too. Just like, what is it I can learn from where I am right now? What is it I can see? What are these people good at? What are these people not good at?
Yeah.
Because everybody's got their strengths and their weaknesses. Like nobody's perfect, I'm far from perfect, but I like to think, I try to be a role model to people too. I have a 20+ year career.
Yeah.
I get messages from my old students or old residents all the time, which is really one of the nicer things of having been around for a while now, of what they're up to. And it's really nice.
I bet. Well, I think with what you're also pointing to is something I've seen in a lot of my podcast guests in terms of people who've really sometimes taken chances or stepped into something new. And that is, they've allowed themselves to be curious. And I think that's the other part that you're pointing to is it's not even about whether you like something you've seen or not liked it. So you just get curious about it. And that has taken you from one thing to the next. Well, John, this has been great. I just love your story and all the things you're doing in the world, and keep doing it.
Thank you.
I mean, 20 years in, you still got a lot left to do.
Yes, I do.
And I'm excited. And healthcare is very fortunate to have you. We're very fortunate to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Dr. Gian Varbaro. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 276. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button right there. Leave an honest rating and brief review. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.